You've given us a written statement. I don't think we should continue with you today.
All right, let's get some analysis around this, and political analyst and researcher Dr. Dale McKinley joining us this evening. Dr. McKinley, good evening to you. Good to have you with us as always. Cedrick Nkabinde says he could not remember important dates, partly because his devices were taken away by police who are conducting investigations around exactly what we are listening to coming out of these important commissions of inquiry. Is this harsh action or one that is fitting?
Well, look, I mean, there's certainly, it's the way that he has testified and has sort of, wrapped himself around contradictions is quite surprising. I mean, for a chief of staff, first of all. I mean, I don't think it's expected that someone like that, who's responsible for, a minister's programs and should know these things, he shouldn't come before a committee and have contradictory statements, that's for sure. But whether or not, the MPs are overreacting and then saying, look, we're not going to continue with this anymore. Look, I mean, there's a debate there, because if you look at some of the witnesses that have come in front of both the ad hoc committee in particular, one could probably, a forensic, person could probably pick apart a number of contradictory statements and other things. So, I mean, that's a debatable proposition of what they've done, but they're certainly, I think, very, very surprising that someone in his position would come in front of and know that the nation is watching and sort of wrap himself around these kinds of very, very serious kinds of contradictions, which don't look very good at all.
I think it was the Member of Parliament from the benches of the Patriotic Alliance who sought to bring us some examples from previous testimonies, as you now refer to some of them. And in particular, I think he made reference to the general from KwaZulu-Natal, Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi's testimony, and this had to do with what he said were receipts, if you like, basically almost messages that would have been taken from Bheki phone, who had been in communication with Ket Matlala, and that there would have been bank accounts shared, and that he would bring that information to the commission, only for Bheki to come to the commission, or rather to the ad hoc committee, and tell it that he does not text, he does not send text messages. Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi then comes back and says, I made a mistake here, and I will therefore need to amend my statement, which I provided to this committee. If you weigh that against what has happened today, again, I ask the question, are members of parliament being harsh here, or is there a teachable lesson?
I think members of parliament are playing politics. And I think in that case, they are fairly, there's some members of parliament that clearly want a particular kind of narrative to come through. They have not made any sort of secret about that. And that is that they fairly much take whatever General Mkhwanazi says as truth. They haven't really fundamentally questioned it, as you mentioned. They haven't come back and said, well, listen, where are all these kinds of things that you said in your initial briefing? We're still waiting for that forensic evidence. And I think in this case, there's a narrative that you can see it playing out in the ad hoc committee that is essentially it follows the factions within the South African police services. So there are certain political parties that want to say, look, we support Mkhwanazi. There's all these criminal syndicates. There's, the minister is bad. They must get rid of him and everything else. And that is a particular narrative. There's others that are trying to sort of say, look, it's not exactly what it appears. It's a bit more complicated. There's questions about the KZN political killings task team and so forth. What all of this says to me, Oli, is, and I've said this before, is that the actual commissions and the testimonies reveal the factionalization of the SAPS in very, very deep and structural ways. That what we're seeing is all these contradictory statements coming back and forth. I forgot, I didn't know, well, maybe this is the way that it was. And I think in that case, it's an indication more than anything else of the sad state of SAPS and also the politics that is being played now, because this is playing in front of the entire nation and there are political points to be scored.
Not to say, Dr. McKinley, that South Africans, ordinary South Africans, and at least the ones that are active on social media are sort of the test case as to what they think of these two concurrent processes, Madlanga and the ad hoc committee. But you watch here on social media and the kind of commentary directed towards the ad hoc committee and the goings on there, some are very harsh to say this is a bit of a joke, the manner in which this process is being undertaken in Parliament. Is that a fair assessment based on what we are witnessing and, you know, sometimes what does appear to be a bit of a political play here and there?
I would not go as far to say it's a joke. I don't think it's a joke because I think these are very serious things. But what I think is correct, the criticism is correct, is that Parliament is a political playing field. The Madlanga Commission is you know, judges or ex-judges and legal people basically conducting an investigation in fairly legal and formal kinds of ways in terms of the way they're doing it, much like many of the other commissions. And so it's not what you find in the ad hoc committee is you find parliamentarians. I mean, if anybody's been sitting there for the hours and listening, it's clear they're playing to the cameras. They're playing, they want to be, you know, they want to be on national television. They want to be seen to be questioning harshly and being smart and catching people out. And I think that's what we should expect. Parliament is not a judicial commission of inquiry. It's not a presidential commission of inquiry. It's Parliament. Parliament is political. And it's going to, these things are going to come to the surface. And what you're going to see is, here's the PA, here's the EFF, here's MK, here's the ANC, and each of them is going to come at it in a different way and is going to ask different kinds of questions and try to get different kinds of impacts coming out of that and try to catch people out. So in some ways, it's quite entertaining. But I think in many cases, in terms of an investigation, the Madlanga Commission is much more serious, and it will come out with things that are, I think, should we say, potentially much more investigatory depth to them than the parliamentary process would.
Well, it's a good point to end the conversation then on this particular question, and that is the credibility of the entire process that's taking place in Parliament versus the Madlanga inquiry. What are you saying ultimately? When these members of Parliament do conclude their work, South Africans must not have lingering questions about whether members of Parliament conducted a process that was beyond reproach.
Look, I don't think we could ever ask of the Parliament to conduct something beyond reproach. I think, you know, it's asking too much because politics is politics and it's going to play itself out. But what I think we can expect is parliamentarians, when they actually have all the information, when they complete this process, to take it seriously. And their mandate is to see whether there's a need for reform, whether there's a need for other new legislation, what needs to be taken. It's not their job to make criminal charges in order to try to get the police to do certain things in terms of arresting people. What their mandate is to oversee the South African police services and to see whether or not there are fundamental problems that can be changed by our political representatives. That's what we should expect from them. If they do that, then irrespective of what we might question in terms of the process, I think they would be doing their job. If they don't, and they come and then start arguing out and start throwing eggs at each other and everything else in Parliament, then we'll go back to a situation where many South Africans will think, well, Parliament's just a circus and they're playing politics here and they're not really serious about getting to the bottom of what really most citizens want, which is an effective, corruption-free, and a SAPS that serves the public.
Dr. Dale McKinley, thank you very much for your time and analysis. He's a political analyst and a researcher.